Hey, check this out. Second time in my life I'm trying this Facebook Live thing. I had a story I wanted to tell people. A couple of you have already heard it. Now, I like this story. And I was going to type it up, and I realized it probably wouldn't come out off as well in print. You kind of have to hear it. And it has to do with my last trip to the wound clinic. I go every couple of weeks because I've got this wound on my leg they've been taking care of. And the last time I went back to my room, and I call it my room because every time I go in, they say go on back to room 4. So I kind of think they should just put my name on the door, but that's beside the point. I go back to the room, and like I always do, I just go ahead and take my pants off because they're going to have to work on my legs, so why wait till they come in? And I sit there and I wait for the nurse, and they come in and they'll do vitals and stuff. So this day I go back and I'm sitting there and this nurse comes in, and I recognized her from my visit before. It was her very first day of work, and she came in and just observed the nurses who knew what they were doing. So I knew she was new, and she came in and she did the vitals, and then she was getting out the supplies they need, There's like bandages and things. And she's looking at her iPad and seeing, oh, we do this, we need this, we need this. And she's getting stuff out of the cabinet. Now, this operation usually takes a nurse about 3 minutes. They get out all their supplies they need, and then they can get to work. She literally took 20 minutes. I know this because when she came in, I had my phone out and was listening to Pandora. So she came in, I glanced at the phone, I saw what time it was. And when she got done laying out the supplies, I looked at my phone again, and it had been almost exactly 20 minutes. But it was a little annoying, but I let that go because I knew she was new. And then she turned around and she said to me, are you wearing your, and I forget what they call them, but it's basically these stockings that they put on. And I just looked down at my legs, at the stockings, and didn't say anything. Because I thought that was kind of a stupid question. But anyway, now here's where the story really starts. And I always have to tell people, I swear by all the gods, this is exactly the way this happened. Because especially people who know me are going to think, there's no way you were this calm. And even if I heard someone telling this story, I'd think, are you making yourself look better than this? Because you always think, there's two sides to stories and stuff. But honestly, this is the way the conversation went. She turns around, she said to me, well, this is an RN visit, right? And I said, and again, this is my tone of voice through this whole. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, the provider isn't available, so you'll just be seeing RNs. Now, in case you don't know, for some strange reason, providers are what they call I don't think they hardly ever have a doctor there, but nurse practitioners and stuff. But that's beside the point. She said, because we only have one provider today, and so you'll just be seeing nurses. Now, any of you from around here, Osceola State College is where I go. And right there, just to travel is like 2 hours out of my day and 2 hours out of my chauffeur's day besides. So it's putting him out. So I said, well, why didn't they tell me it was just going to be an RN visit? I said, I remember this happening a couple of months ago, and they called and said, it would just be RNs, do you still want to come? And I said, well, no, I can just have my home health nurse do it instead of wasting all that time. And that's what I did that day. So this day I said, well, why didn't they tell me? And she goes, well, I don't know. It wasn't my decision. And I said, well, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to come clear over here when I could have just had a nurse do it at home. And she said, well, I don't know. I didn't do it. This conversation went on for a minute or two, pretty much like that. And then she said, well, if you want, I can go ask somebody who would know. Now, this is the only thing, when I look back at it, that I can think of that might have sounded at all out of hand. But again, I still said it in this calm voice. I said, well, that'd probably be a good idea, because if I go and ask them, it could turn into yelling. So she goes, and she comes back in a couple of minutes. Now here's where we start getting to it. She comes back and she says, well, you see, I guess what it is they said because last time you were here, you had an infection, they wanted to see it. And I said, well, don't they think that the RN that comes to my house would recognize what an infection looks like? I just realized my finger's been over where the microphone is. I hope you've been hearing any of this, if anybody actually watches this. Anyway, I said, don't you think the RN at home would know? And she said, well, I don't know. She said, I'm not the one that made the decision. And I said, why do you sound more upset than I am? And she goes, well, because I feel threatened. Now, this is the point where my voice may have changed a little bit. I may have increased volume, gone to a different octave, but not too much. I was like, threatened? What do you mean threatened? What did I do to threaten you? And she goes, well, just the things you were saying. And again, like I said, the only thing, thinking back, that I said at all was it could become yelling. And there was another thing, and when I thought back, I couldn't remember exactly when she said it. I think it's when she was like heading to the door. She said, and you said you wanted to leave. No, I never said that at all. And what kind of sense would that make? To drive over there, and then what? I'm going to drive home and then call the home health and say, I need a nurse now? No, I never said I was going to leave. I just said it seemed like a wasted trip. So she goes to leave, and I open the door, and I very, very calmly said, could I get a competent nurse in here? Yeah, I definitely changed octaves that time. And she goes, and so there I'm waiting. A minute later, I could hear conversation right outside the door, and I opened the door. And one of the nurses that I've known for a while is standing there, and this crazy broad is there talking to her. And I said, do not believe a word she says. She's psychotic. So then that nurse and another nurse ended up coming in, and I went through the whole thing with them. And they were saying, well, she's new. We don't really know her. All the other nurses that I talked to, none of them seemed to be at all suspicious that it was my fault. And they were like saying, we don't really know her. And after a while, the supervisor came in. I went through the whole thing with her. And it was obvious that this psycho was out there going, this guy's back there, and he pulled a gun on me, or whatever she's saying. So the thing is, the whole point of this, I've never been one of those people who is like kids these days, because that's been going on forever, I never said, oh, do you see, the way they wear their hair? Oh, the music. Well, the one thing, I think it's stupid, this whole thing with guys wearing their pants down below their ass, but that's another thing. But anyway, like I said, kids these days, this has gone back forever. Somewhere there was a guy saying, "What's with these damn kids?" When when I was a kid, I'd have felt lucky just to have a cave to sleep in. Now they need rocks to sit on. So anyway, but the more I think about it, and people I've talked to, I really think there is a kids these days thing, and it'll be interesting. I got a couple of people on here who are in their 30s or younger, and then I consider them the kids these days. But it's like everybody's got anxiety now, and they need safe spaces and all this crap. And I really think that we, and by we I mean you people, because I never had kids, but we have raised a generation of pussies. You know, you just can't talk anymore to be, I mean, when I was a kid, everybody was an insult comedian. Like in high school, you'd say stuff to people like, "Oh, hey, is that a new shirt? Yeah, that looks like the one we donated to Goodwill." Or, "Hey, new pair of shoes? Yeah, I had a pair of shoes just like that before my dad got a job." You know, just simple little stuff like that. Everybody knew you were joking. You say that to some kid today, it's going to be like, "Oh my God, what are they saying about me?" But anyway, yeah, so I got a wound clinic appointment tomorrow. I'm going to be interested to see how that goes. I'm really hoping that this crazy broad has had an incident with somebody else, nothing serious. Just because I hate to have this whole thing hanging out there, and them thinking it was my fault. But so I'm hoping they saw something and they're going, "Yeah, I think maybe Mr. Monkey's right about this one." One other side thing I'll mention quick is I had to laugh at myself because just the night before I was talking to my sister Barb, who I will allow to remain anonymous, and we were talking about Psych 101 people. Someone who goes to college and they take one psych class, and now all of a sudden they're diagnosing everybody. And the reason I found it funny is because when I was there talking to the nurses, I heard myself saying things like, "I don't know, this chick has had some kind of trauma in her life or something. There's something wrong." And then I laughed because I realized I was Psych 101ing her. But in my defense, I had more like 4 or 5 psych classes. So it was more like I was Psych, 304ing her. But anyway, that's my story. Feel free to comment and tell me that I'm absolutely right, that there's something wrong with kids these days. If you disagree, that's okay too, but I don't care. Anyway, thanks. Bye. Now all I gotta do is figure out how to turn this off again.